Arsenal's record in London derbies is sensational. I think they've lost 1 of the last 26. At home, they're pretty much imperious. And I can just see a scenario, maybe it's a lazy narrative because they've just had Fofana sent off, their 8th red card of the season, where Chelsea do something stupid in this game on Sunday. Their emotions get the better of them and Arsenal go on and win it. And yeah, I think it will be another step closer to the title.
From a mentality point of view, they are worthy champions. The problem is, so are Manchester City. Look, I think City look good at the moment, don't they? There's no doubt about it. But I still feel there's a little bit of a slip up in them. I think points will be dropped from both of these teams.
How did Chelsea negotiate a trip to the Emirates? Because Crook's right, their record against Mikel Arteta's team, absolutely abysmal.
New manager, but same problem. Same problem of losing points from winning position. Not only are Arsenal buoyed by what they did against Spurs, but Chelsea look vulnerable.
Yes, it's Premier League All Access with $1 Million Minto and Alex Crook. Here with me, Sam Matterface. And the Booze brothers, maybe a little bit jaded after 2 days of racing, betting and golfing and the odd tipple. But back to work now, boys, if that's okay. I know that Crook said he's had a bad back from carrying you around the golf course. Scott, is that true?
Do you know what, Sam? I wasn't involved in all the drinking. Maybe that was my problem. And when you get to the point of you're saying and admitting that Alex Crook carried you for the first 10, 11 holes in a golf day. I mean, he's got to come down from 28 now. I've got to say, handicap 28. But so was Daichi, one of the lads we were playing with as well. Great lad, him and Tim.
Crookmeister's golfing technique is famed for being a little bit ropey. However, I've heard you're getting better at swinging.
I've been down the driving range a bit more, so I'm trying to extend the swing rather than just sort of stab it. And yeah, it seems to pay dividends. But I've got to say, it wasn't vintage Minto. His golf swing was like some of his crosses during his playing days, a little bit wayward.
He's being a little bit spiky this week, isn't he? He was very demanding, I found, as Scott. I don't know if you experienced this as well. Whilst we were both working on the Champions League this week, and he was in yet another pub, the text message came through. Just before 7 o'clock, we were about to both go on air. World Cup preview show in May, 8 o'clock, this time, this racetrack. Are you in? And we were like, okay, well, hold on a second, let's check the diary. When no one confirmed within about a nanosecond, he went, all right, if you don't want to do it, then I'll get Dean Ashton.
Honestly, I did Real Madrid Benfica the night before. I was on with Gabby and Al. I did the talkSPORT Daily Pod, which was arranged to make sure I could play golf with Crookie. Plus, there's the score run. And he's complaining I didn't make him priority number one.
I'm just trying to get you boys some work. You know, I know you're struggling a bit on that department, on that front.
Forest and Palace both through in the European competitions to make it 9 teams from the Premier League in the last 16 of all 3 competitions. But talking of struggling in certain departments, both those 2 teams tried to make it as nervy as possible last night. Palace were not great.
No, I was at Selhurst Park, and I've got to be honest, you did the first game. Zrinski are a poor side, particularly away from home. Any half-decent Premier League team should put them to the sword, and Palace didn't really do that. It was a struggle up front for Jurgen Strand-Larsen. I thought Gesson, who got the second goal, did really well, actually. He's had a pretty positive start to his Selhurst Park career. Brennan Johnson comes on and gets his first assist in 11 games since that £35 million move from Spurs. So there were some positives, but I've seen Palace a lot in the Conference League. I think I'm right in saying they're still the favourites to win it.
Now,
I don't think they will.
Do you not?
I don't think they're playing well enough. I don't think they're quite European savvy enough.
And we keep talking about the Oliver Glasner situation, and I said to you, look, I think they almost need like a little bit of a pep up, really, because I don't think that they're playing as well as they can. I saw last night everyone was saying that the harmony in the group is fine, the dressing room's fine. Oliver Glasner was saying that, but then Adam Wharton gets taken off.
Didn't look happy.
He wasn't happy about it. Now, whether that was the injury that he might have picked up or the knot that he picked up in the tackle beforehand, I don't know. But he didn't look happy, did he?
No, he didn't. And I think Maxence Lacroix spoke to us afterwards and was praising Oliver Glasner. But it's the laborious playing style.
Everywhere that Oliver Glasner goes, Maxence Lacroix follows.
Well, maybe. Yeah, quite possibly. But, I mean, there was a stat, I think it was still right at the end of the game, but certainly an hour in, the 3 Palace players who'd had the most touches of the ball were the 3 central defenders. I don't think you need 3 centre-backs at home against a team second in the Bosnian League.
Well, that's been one of the issues with the Conference League, isn't it? It's sort of exposed the fact that they're very good without the ball, Crystal Palace, and when people are coming on to them and taking the game to them. But when they've got to do that, they find it a little bit more difficult. As far as Forest is concerned, almost throw it away. Eventually, they got through. Champions League, Scott was doing the Real Madrid game. They're not going to win it, Scott, are they?
I don't think so. I mean, look, there's no Jude Bellingham, there was no Mbappe on the night, but this is not vintage Real Madrid. Although we have said that before, and they have somehow found a way to do it. But no, not for me. I think it's a great opportunity for the English boys. I really, really do. Talk about Crystal Palace. I agree with Crookie. I think they're in such a bad place now, on and off the pitch, that I can't believe I'm saying this, because I think Glasner's a really good manager, and you can argue he's their greatest ever manager. He has to go now because they've just limped through the line. And this is for a third tier competition in Europe. This is where the strength of depth of the Premier League should be coming in. In terms of the top, you are fighting the likes of Paris Saint-Germain, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich. So it's much tougher. But yeah, no, I don't think Real Madrid will win it. And I think Glasner should go.
Yep. Okay. I think, and I said this on breakfast on Friday morning, a Premier League team will win the Champions League this year. And arguably, we should be in a position at the end of the season where the Premier League have collected all 3 major European trophies. That's how strong they are in comparison. The other opposition in the Champions League, I'm afraid, are just not as good as those Premier League teams, the majority of them anyway. PSG, I saw them in midweek, off it. Real Madrid, we've already mentioned. Barcelona, it's sporadic. They go up and down. Manchester City, Liverpool and Arsenal have got a fantastic chance of winning something special.
And
maybe even Chelsea as well. I got it in there eventually, don't worry. And that's it for European action. On to the Premier League now. Chelsea are in action this weekend. They take on Arsenal. Crook and I will be there. And Manchester City got a big game against Leeds. Arsenal against Chelsea, Sunday afternoon live with us. We'll be bringing you updates throughout the afternoon with Game Day Live. Mood music changes on Arsenal every single week, Scott, doesn't it? 1 minute they're brilliant, next minute they're not. They did a brilliant job of beating Tottenham at Tottenham 4-1, but everybody beats Tottenham at Tottenham. So what did you learn from that particular game that gives you confidence that Arsenal could go on and win the league?
That they have the mentality. I think that's the biggest issue from here on in now. We know they've got strength in depth. We know they've got quality players. We know that technically they're as good as anyone in the Premier League. They have the best squad in the Premier League. Now, what goes on between the years? And for me, the way they bounced back after that United game where they beat Leeds convincingly at Ellen Road, and then coming back after that. Look, okay, it's a poor Spurs side, but I was listening to you as I was taking the dogs for a walk, and you were saying this is one of the best atmospheres you've ever been involved in. You know, it was incredible. So to deal with that, to go into the Lions' Den, to dominate the game in the way that they did, and let's face it, the stats will show that they absolutely did dominate it. The eye test will also tell you as well. From a mentality point of view, they are worthy champions. The problem is, so are Manchester City.
Yeah, and Manchester City have got the form over the last part of the season. Now, a lot of people will say, well, it's a different Manchester City this year. They've got loads of changes to personnel. But even last year, when they'd had the rebuild, they went unbeaten in the last 10 games of the league season. It's just the way that he preps the side at the beginning of the campaign to get them to hit peak form towards the end of each season. So there will be a threat. The good news for Arsenal is if you look at their running, there's not much there to trouble them apart from the game against Chelsea that we're going to on Sunday and the match with Manchester City. So 3 points here is essential, right?
Yeah, and I think they'll get it. I know you've been talking to Alan Brazil and Ray Parlour about the fact that Chelsea haven't beaten Arsenal anywhere in any competition for 4 years. Arsenal's record in London derbies is sensational. I think they've lost 1 of the last 26. At home, they're pretty much imperious. And I can just see a scenario, maybe it's a lazy narrative because they've just had Fofana sent off, their 8th red card of the season, where Chelsea do something stupid in this game on Sunday. Their emotions get the better of them and Arsenal go on and win it. And yeah, I think it will be another step closer to the title.
Is that a bit of wishful thinking as well? Because Chelsea are big rivals with Manchester United for a top 5 place.
Well, it's a massive weekend for United. We'll come on to Crystal Palace. I think United will beat Palace. And what I saw last night, I don't think Chelsea beat Arsenal. So therefore, this could be a pivotal weekend, not just in terms of the title, but the race for a Champions League place as well.
It will be unlikely for Chelsea to do something silly again. They haven't got the form for getting players sent off on a regular basis, Scott, or giving away stupid goals when they've got in front. How did Chelsea negotiate a trip to the Emirates? Because Crook's right, their record against Mikel Arteta's team, absolutely abysmal. And Arsenal have lost just 3 of their 43 matches this season.
Yeah, I can see tactics being quite similar to how Liam deployed it in the second leg of the Carabao Cup final just a few weeks ago, just trying to make it very, very difficult to beat. Like, I was at the home game and Moises Caicedo got sent off. And yet that was a brilliant performance. It really was, with 10 men.
We were buzzing after that, Scott, weren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, that was after the Barcelona win as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, so new manager, but same problem of losing points and winning position, same problem of discipline, same problem being at home. Obviously, this one's not at home, of just not seeing out wins. Yeah, I think maybe, again, 6-8 weeks ago, then Chelsea would have a chance of getting a point here. But I think not only are Arsenal buoyed by what they did against Spurs, but Chelsea looked vulnerable. And I was at Stamford Bridge at the Burnley game, and it was just a really poor performance all round. So unfortunately, I can't see Chelsea getting anything out of this game.
Really poor performance because they looked like they believed that they were going to beat Burnley no matter what.
Yeah.
That was the impression that I got from watching that game back on Saturday night. And I think there is a difference between Chelsea that play Wolves, Chelsea that play Leeds, Chelsea that play Burnley, and Chelsea that play Liverpool, Barcelona, and Arsenal. Actually, if you look at the record under Liam Rossigny, they've only lost to Arsenal. They haven't lost to anybody else since he's taken charge, and they do pick up some sizable wins, sometimes against some of the best teams in the league. So they do seem to raise their game for those big matches, and they're going to need to, because their next few weeks is absolutely horrendous. They have got the worst running out of everybody. And actually, the Opta supercomputer predicts they'll finish in 6th position this year, which, bearing in mind, they've just lost the GDP of a small European nation, means that they'll finish outside the Champions League places, which would be hell for them.
Yeah, I think it will, and it'll go back to, was it the right decision to part company with Enzo Maresca? Is there a flaw in the recruitment model? So I think this is a big few weeks for Chelsea, particularly having lost that League Cup semi-final, obviously still in the FA Cup, but they've got a tricky tie there as well, away from home against a Wrexham side who are banging form in the Championship.
Scott, your mate Victor Gyökeres banged in a couple of goals last week against Tottenham Hotspur. How will he do against Chelsea? And who should be the supply line, Eze or Odegaard?
So anybody who's Portuguese or comes from Portugal is now my mate. Is that what we're saying? Yeah,
pretty much, mate. To be honest with you.
Fair enough. I mean, it was a great performance, wasn't it? And you might turn around and he might look back at it in terms of, it's taken its time in terms of a really good all-round performance, not just scoring goals. But what a game to do it in, just like Eze as well. And he's done it in both of them. Look, if I had everyone fit, I'd have Havertz up front and I'd have Odegaard playing. Eze I thought was superb and really good. And well, both of those players were, a lot of the Arsenal players were. But in terms of doing it on a consistent basis, for me, I'd go with Odegaard over Eze. I love Eze as a player. I loved him at QPR. I've always, been sort of backing him and saying he's a quality player and he should be playing for England, certainly in the squad. But he's a player of moments, whereas Martin Odegaard, not only with the ball does he help control the game, but he's much more tactically aware how to press as well. So in terms of that, I'd go with Odegaard. And look, Kai Havertz is injured and you've got to play Gyökeres. He can't do any more than what he's done. Just let him go now and see what happens.
The other thing about Eze is that he often shines in those games where he's given room to play, and Tottenham certainly gave him room to play last week, which was a massive issue for them. As for Chelsea, back-to-back draws against promoted sides. You mentioned there actually whether or not the question will be asked at the end of the season if Chelsea don't make Champions League. Was it the right decision to part with Enzo Maresca? Has Liam Rossigny's reputation been damaged by those 2 draws? Or do you actually think, hold on a second, the guy's only lost 2 games and they were both to Arsenal. Maybe we should cut him a little bit of slack.
Yeah, I think it's more of a flaw of the recruitment. They're making basic errors silly red cards in Fofana's case that you expect from a club and a squad that are devoid of any leaders. And it's something that you guys have spoken about regularly, that naivety, which I think ultimately is going to prove their undoing. But they've got a rookie manager as well in terms of the Premier League. So not only the players learning on the job, so is Liam Rosenior. And this is not a Keith Andrews Brentford situation. At Brentford, you've got a forgiving fan base. You can afford to make the occasional mistake. At Chelsea, everything Liam Rosenior does is going to be analysed to the 10th degree.
Okay, let's ask the question about the recruitment, because I was with Simon Jordan this week and we had a little chat off air and he was saying, you know, what Chelsea are doing long term is going to be fine. And I said, the problem is they're not going to win the league the way they are. They're never going to win the league, right? Because they've got no senior players. The difference between what's happened at Brighton, where they've sort of copied the whole model, they've almost sort of looked at Brighton, copy and pasted, but left out the bit where they bring senior pros alongside them. Where's the Milner, Welbeck and Lallana figure, the Lewis Dunk figure that helps them along? Pascal Gross, yeah. So where's that? And Simon said, well, who would you sign then? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know who you would sign off the top of my head, but you need to have senior players. And he said, you can't just say that. You have to have examples. Now, actually, thinking about it sort of since then, there is a bit of a dearth in the Premier League of players between the ages of 25 and 30 who you would go and pinch right now and put in the Chelsea team. So is there a lack of players, which is the reason behind Chelsea not having the senior pros, or is it still a failure of the recruitment that they haven't got those characters?
Well, I wish you'd have told me we were going to mention that, because I would have come up with a few names, I'm sure. But no, I mean, the bottom line is you can see for the last 3 or 4 years, since after the first window or first 2 windows, they've gone purely youth. And that's it. There's enough data and analysis, and we don't have the data in front of us that they will have to say that this guy is still doing it.
Would you have gone down the route of signing someone like Christian Norgard, for example, who went from Brentford to Arsenal, or someone at I don't know, another successful club in the Premier League, someone like maybe at Crystal Palace, who did well last year, who could be parachuted into that back line? And Mark Gay might have been a good option.
I was going to say they should have certainly been part of that conversation, and they never were. And actually, they were at pains to distance themselves from that conversation.
So midfield was never the problem. That's not the problem for Chelsea. And I said in last summer, if you remember, goalkeeper, centre half, centre forward. Now, I understand the Liam Delap £30 million is a bit of a no-brainer, but he's still very unproven, and we're seeing that. I'd still take Nicholas Jackson, for all his faults, over Liam Delap, and that tells us really where we are. These are the key positions. These are the key positions of a football team, apart from left back, of course. The goalkeeper, the spine of the team, the centre half, and the centre forward. And unfortunately, as well as Joao Pedro's done, and he has done, if you've got a top class striker and you've got a defender, Mike Maignan, for example, what happened there with that deal where they actually made the offer and then they kind of backtracked and said, no, we're not going to go and we don't need him anymore. So I just feel, in terms of just around the training pitch, around the training ground, that's again where those standards are set from the senior pros. And it's not just me, you know, I've spoken to John Terry about it. He came on a golf day and he said exactly the same thing. So give me a little bit of time, give me a little bit of data and that analysis, and I'll be able to come out with some names.
Okay, John Terry also a little bit upset, I think, that he wasn't in the conversation when Chelsea needed an interim manager for a couple of games, and he's been working with the under-21s at the club. And everybody from that group moved up and worked with the first team, and he didn't, and he was a little bit upset.
That is a bit of a snub.
Leeds against Manchester City is another big game involving those who are chasing the title. Manchester City on a decent run, but they didn't have a great start to 2026. And Leeds, traditionally a difficult place to go for most people, but Arsenal made hay there. So Manchester City have got to as well.
Yeah, I mean, they've got an incredible record, I think, under the lights at Elland Road this season. So the fact it's a tea time kickoff does make it a little bit more difficult. But I looked at Leeds' recent run of form, and as much as they've done well, you know, since the system change actually in this reverse fixture to pull away from the bottom three, I think it's 2 wins in 10 in the Premier League for Leeds. They haven't
lost as many games.
No, they haven't. But, you know, they're not winning week in, week out either. So I think it'll be a tough game for City. I think they'll probably concede. but I think they'll come out on top and put that scoreboard pressure on Arsenal as they did last weekend.
City had the benefit of a week off, and Pep Guardiola said after the match that we were at on Saturday night when they beat Newcastle that his team could go out, have a few daiquiris and caipirinhas and chill out with a few cocktails, but 2 good days training before we come back and take on Leeds. How many cocktails do you think they actually had, Scott?
Less than we did at Lingfield.
I was going to say. Look, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? Pep Guardiola says it's fine, and no one says anything. You know, Thomas Frank lets 5 days off or whatever, and obviously there's a big furore about it. Now you can say obviously one's at the top, one's at the bottom, but
slightly different context there.
But the point is the mental side to get away from it, whether it's a positive or a negative atmosphere you're in. So, you know, anyway, that's not the issue here. Look, I think City look good at the moment, don't they? There's no doubt about it. And are they? We still don't know. I still don't know. I can't say that they're now going to go on a 7-match winning run because they're getting there towards that in terms of what they've already done. But I still feel there's a little bit of a slip up in them. I think points will be dropped from both of these teams. And as well as Arsenal did at Ellen Road, City don't have to do the same. They just have to find a way to come back with 3 points. If they do something similar, then again, psychologically, that does make a big statement for them and for Arsenal for sure.
Right, okay. City, obviously with the week off, Leeds 2, statistically, they have the easiest run-in from here. They'll stay up, won't they?
Leeds? Yeah.
Well, not Man City.
Yeah, I think they'll be up. I think they'll be absolutely fine. You know, I think, as you say, that they might not be winning games, but they're picking up decent points. They're harder to beat, much harder to beat than they were at the start of the season. And do you know what? You have to credit Daniel Farke for that change that he made in the reverse fixture. But you have to credit the hierarchy as well, because there was a lot of noise, even in the afterglow promotion, that this guy wasn't going to be good enough for the Premier League. He wasn't good enough at Norwich. They were going to have to make a change. They started the season poorly. It was that Man City game where the pressure was really on his shoulders, but they held their nerve, and it's proved to be the right decision.
I look at from 13th down, and I think they're the only club where it feels like everyone's in it together.
Yeah.
The fans are right behind the manager and the players, and you can't put a price on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do have goal-scoring weapons, don't they? I mean, they're not stellar goal-scoring weapons, but they've got goal-scoring weapons, which is different to a lot of the other teams, especially that are down there. Met just skips in with goals. Calvert-Lewin scores goals. Okafor scores goals. They've got weapons. On to the rest of the weekend. Now we'll look at the battle to stay up in the Premier League and to see if Spurs can pick up their first win in the Premier League of 2026. It's kind of ridiculous, really, that we are ticking over into March on Sunday and still Tottenham haven't won a game in 2026. There's been no new manager bounce, thrashed by Arsenal in the North London derby. And the scenes during that match of Igor Tudor berating Mickey van der Ven and trying to get him to push up and the sort of disconnect that almost seemed apparent straight away there was a little bit of a concern. He says it's the hardest job he's ever had, and he's had a few.
Yeah, he has, and I think he's right, you know, and actually it goes back to what Scott was making about Leeds there and that sort of siege mentality. We're in this together. Feels like the complete opposite of Spurs. Yes, the atmosphere was brilliant for the first half against Arsenal, but that quickly evaporated when Gyökeres scored that goal early in the second half. By the full-time whistle, most of the home fans had already headed for the Tottenham high road. There did look like a disconnect between players and manager because he's a completely different character than Thomas Frank. And again, I know you don't like me making the comparison, but even Juric came in to Southampton. He tried to rule with an iron fist. He tried to get the players to run a lot more, which is something Tudor said after that North London derby. They didn't buy into it. They had a bad dressing room. I think he's got a bad dressing room here at Tottenham. And that concerns me.
What I do think is absolutely right when you make that comparison is that Southampton went from one style of football to the completely opposite style of football. And the same sort of thing with Tottenham. Tottenham keep going from one style of football and one style of manager to a different style of manager and a different style of football to a different style of manager again and another style of football. And the constant change and churn of that obviously is going to leave players feeling a little bit discombobulated, Scott. I mean, is there a better way of operating here?
I love that word. Can you say it again?
Discombobulating.
That's fantastic.
Like you on the golf course.
Yeah. only for the first 10, and then I was carrying you towards the end.
I was knackered by then.
But mate, that's the way to get him though, isn't it? Just to tire him out fitness-wise. I played table tennis with him the other day. 2 sets, he was absolutely bashing it. And the third set, he was so tired he couldn't get a point. I beat him 21-3.
Yeah, he's still wearing the same clobber. I hope it gets changed when you're doing that as well. Anyway, yeah, look, I mean, what I would say is I think Thomas Frank is the argument has been he's been quite a pragmatic Spurs manager, whereas Igor Tudor is quite a pragmatic, although he wants to play on the front foot. For him to come out after one game and say this is the most difficult job that I've had says it all. And it doesn't bode well. It doesn't bode well because he's literally setting the fans up. It's like Thomas Frank when his first press conference, we will lose games. Fans don't want to hear that. You know, so for him to come out and say that, it's going to be tough from here on in.
I think Spurs need a better PR, don't they, really? And need to sell themselves a little bit better. If the 2 managers that have last come in have said, it's going to be really tough, we're going to lose games. Hello, lads.
It says it all, doesn't it? And it says where Spurs are right now. Look, you can lose to Arsenal, and even in the way that they did, you know, teams do that, although Tottenham probably never should. But this game here, I think, is absolutely crucial. This Fulham, and then they got Liverpool away as well. I mean, that feel-good factor that you guys were, and I thought you were brilliant the way you sort of conveyed it on the radio. If it felt like I was there, that's going to go. And it's going to get toxic again very quickly if these next 2 or 3 results don't go well. So Craven Cottage, Fulham are back to winning ways. They're fighting for Europe. This will not be easy.
Yeah, the atmosphere was sensational at the North London derby. There's no doubt about it, especially at the beginning. I mean, towards the end, obviously drifted away, but actually it's really brilliant atmosphere. And we spent a bit of time with Tottenham fans afterwards, didn't we? We went to the bar with them in the concourse afterwards and had a good old chat about how they were feeling and you know, basically said, we're just not good enough. We're never going to win today. Our team is rubbish compared to their team. You know, we just have to put up with it. Which brings me on to the next question, which is apparently this week we've been told that should they stay up next year, they are going to invest heavily in this playing squad.
I'm sure that'll make Tottenham fans feel an awful lot better going into
Isn't that
a
what they said?
relegation 6-pointer. Yeah.
Don't worry, lads. If you go down, if you go down, you're on your own. But if you stay up, we'll give you a load of cash.
Yeah, listen, that just struck me as trying to create a bit of positive PR after a difficult weekend in the North London derby. I don't see Tottenham ever going toe-to-toe with the likes of Arsenal and Liverpool and Manchester City, even Chelsea and Manchester United when it comes to spending, when it comes to wages, when it comes to attracting the big players.
I disagree with you.
Don't see it.
I think it will happen eventually. I think it will happen, but I'm not necessarily sure it will happen under this ownership. But I think they are set up for future success, Tottenham. But that future success is still some way off in the distance, right? Because they are going to eventually, their revenue is going to go through the roof because they've got this great stadium, this great arena, or whatever. If they can be sensible about what happens next, they will end up generating even more income. If their commercial department is as good as it's supposed to be, and certainly I know they've changed that sort of situation as well recently, then they should be in a position where they could have quite a bit more success by buying better players. Let's see what happens there. Liverpool are in a similar sort of situation, go back 10, 15 years, where they needed to upgrade a stadium, they needed to upgrade their revenue. They've managed to bring in enough players and get a good enough manager to get them not only in the title conversation, but in Champions League finals and winning Champions Leagues. Again, they take on West Ham this weekend. And West Ham, I actually thought in their game against Bournemouth, Scott, I know you've watched the game as well, much better than they have been recently. But that killer instinct of scoring goals. Actually, if Jordan Petrovic doesn't make that brilliant save from Callum Wilson, then maybe we're talking about a very different situation at the bottom of the table. Can I get something from Liverpool?
This is not a strong Liverpool side at the moment. You know, look, when you think about what happened to them, winning games when they weren't playing well, then they fell off a cliff. Then he tried to make it much more pragmatic, and he did. By now, I'm thinking they're going to kick on again, and they haven't. And that Forest game was a perfect example of that, where, look, you can say they put the pressure on the team and therefore they earned the right to win the game. But they're going back to how they were at the very start of the season, not playing particularly well and finding a way to win. And that's unsustainable. You can't do that. So West Ham have to get something out of this game, because I really think they've turned the corner after that Wolves game in particular, but the Forest loss as well. I think performances, the results have been better. They've got some very difficult games coming up. So on paper, the Bournemouth one at home was one that you should be winning. But Bournemouth have actually done really well, even with selling Antoine Semenyo. So, it's not easy. But West Ham, just like Leeds are doing, even if you're not winning, you need to not lose. And I think this is one of those games where you need to find a way. They're not shipping in the goals they were early in the season. They need to find a way to not lose this match.
Yeah, the only difference here, Scott, is that Leeds United are within sort of arm's length of the bottom three, whereas West Ham are very much ensconced in it, and winning is more important to them than maybe it is to Leeds United. But I get to take your point. A point at Liverpool is a good one. Salah, a real concern. No goal in 9 Premier League games, the longest spell of his career without scoring. Even if they want to get rid of him in the summer, I'm not going to be entirely sure they'll find someone to take his wages on. Maybe Saudi Arabia is his only route quickly.
Yeah, but again, the transfer fee is going to be a lot less than when they had the chance to sell him last summer on the back of that stellar season. You do wonder what's happened to Mo Salah, but he looks a pale imitation of the player who took the league by storm last year. I think this is the type of opponent that Liverpool don't like playing against, because what they've got now, West Ham, with Somerville in form, Jarrod Bowen, they've got weapons that can get in behind that defence, which I think is still suspect to pace running in behind. So they're not going to want the ball, West Ham. They're going to want Liverpool to dominate and try and hit on the counter. Forest did it brilliantly earlier in the season under Sean Dyche.
Interestingly, Jarrod Bowen's been shut down a bit by opponents because they know that he likes to get on the ball, come inside on his left foot, try and make something happen. They've been sort of showing him down the outside, and it's been a little bit more difficult for him in the last few weeks. However, Liverpool have a sort of propensity to leave that left side open, don't they? And Jarrod Bowen may well enjoy himself as a result of that. Brighton against Nottingham Forest this weekend as well. Now, Crook, Brighton look to be in trouble. They got a big win away at Brentford. Nottingham Forest, unlucky against Liverpool, through in the Europa League, but not playing particularly well. Vitor Pereira, the second ever Nottingham Forest manager to lose his first 2 home games. Who was the first one?
Ange.
Don't go there.
So what happens here? Quickly.
What we do, mate. I think Brighton will win. I think it was a good performance for them at Brentford last weekend. I think they've been playing well in defeat anyway. I think they'll take confidence from that. I think, again, you'll see a home team packed with that experience that you've already talked about in this podcast. And yeah, I think it'll be a home victory and more pressure on Vitor Pereira and Forest.
Okay, on to the rest of the weekend now, and a big game for Manchester United in the race for the top 4. Manchester United Crystal Palace is another one of the Sunday games, and we're at the Arsenal-Chelsea match, but we'll keep you in touch with absolutely everything on Game Day Live from 1:30, so join us for that. And not a vintage game on Monday night for Manchester United, but they take on Crystal Palace, knowing that with Chelsea playing against Arsenal, there's a great chance to put a little bit of distance between them and one of their rivals, at least, for a top 5 place next season. It's another win for Michael Carrick, and I know that you know him relatively well, Scott. I've spoken to him a lot as well, and I know Adrian Durham might have gone over the top by suggesting it was vintage Ferguson. However, what it was a brilliant result in difficult circumstances. And sometimes when you're not playing particularly well, what you have to do is get the result. And they've done that more often than not.
And it's a result that they weren't doing and haven't done for several years because they've been so inconsistent. And it seems to be what Mickey's bringing in is consistency. Even if you're not playing well, and those first 2 games were just sensational performances against the top 2, since then, it's been brilliant. And even the West Ham game where, they'd lost the game and somehow they found a way to not lose the game. And that's what I'm talking about. If you can't win, don't lose. So well done there. I've got my head in my hands here, Sam. Do you remember in the early part of the season, as the season started, a certain Alex Crook said we can finish 5th?
I know.
I think they can finish 3rd. I really do. There's no Premier League. There's no games other than Premier League. They're playing a Palace side here that have just come off the back of a tougher than it should have been European game. I fancy United to win this. I fancy them to definitely finish top 5, even better.
Yeah, but before we give him too much credit, he thought Ruben Amorim was getting it right, which is why he said that, because of what he'd seen in pre-season. And he didn't envisage that Michael Carrick were going to be parachuted in from nowhere. But either way, actually, if you look back at Amorim's position when he left the club, they were still in a decent.
I also did envisage that the likes of Newcastle would fall away. I thought Villa would as well. In fairness,
well, they looked like they were going to the beginning of the camp.
Yeah, so
and they still might, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yes.
They still might. They're not playing particularly well at the moment. They're drying up in terms of goals. And actually, they play on Friday night against Wolverhampton Wanderers. I don't think that's an easy assignment, especially bearing in mind I think they failed to win 6 of their last 8 trips to Molineux. But yeah, Manchester United certainly should be eyeing up that 3rd position, shouldn't they?
Yeah, they should. It's there for the taking. 1 game a week. 1 game a week is actually a great position for a fan as well, because you win the game at the weekend and then you don't need to worry about football for another 6 or 7 days.
But it hasn't been working like that. It's been working the other way, where you've been losing games and you've been getting the ump for a week.
Well, yeah, but obviously Michael Carrick has changed all that. He deserves a lot of credit for the way he's handled the Šeško situation, because he's a big money signing. He's been scoring goals. The temptation must have been to start him on Monday night, but again, he decided this wasn't the right game to start him. He brings him on. Actually, about 5 minutes before he came on, I said to my 2 boys, I said, what's going to happen here is Šeško's going to come on and he's going to score the winner. And that's exactly what did happen. I think he will start this weekend. I think Ahmad will come out of the team, Cunha and Mbeumo will go wide, and Šeško will be in there, and I think he'll score again.
Was that before or after I sent you that message at half-time telling you how many goals Manchester United scored in the second half?
I didn't see that.
Oh, don't give me that. Don't give me that.
But Scott's right, by the way. Under the other fella, United don't win that game, they probably lose it.
Šeško has done really well. They really like him, by the way, Scott. Mickey Carrick thinks he's got something.
Yeah, he's a talented player. Don't talk to me, though, about being a brilliant player if you can't get in the first 11. But all he can do is what he's doing at the moment, coming off the bench. And it might be that we see the very best of him next season. You know what I thought about him not taking a penalty? I know he was told to in that Grimsby game. Shearer, Fowler, Wright, Owen. They'd have said, I don't care if my leg's hanging off, I'm taking a pen. But actually, it seems like he's getting used to it. And it's almost like people are allowed to have a bad first season or not a great first season. And for him coming off the bench and making the impact he is, I don't see why Mickey would change it, to be honest.
Interesting. Crystal Palace not in great form. Certainly doesn't look to be in great spirits either, but they can be obdurate opponents. Brighton and Mbeumo has been brilliant, actually, so far this season. He might require his pace in goal to get beyond a rather obdurate defence, because despite the fact they're not in great form, actually they've got 3 very good defenders, and Tariq Mitchell and Daniel Munoz do a very good job of blocking up those channels, and they've got great speed as well. I think we need to just pay tribute a little bit to Senna Lomans, who's done very, very well as the Manchester United goalkeeper. Come in, very unfussy, very composed, dealing with all sorts of different things. The physicality of the Premier League is so hard, especially for a goalkeeper who's come from Belgium. And let's be honest, he's tall, but he's quite wispy, isn't he? He's not like, he's more David De Gea than he is Andre Onana. But if Andre Onana had been in goal on Monday night, there would have been a completely different outcome to that game. I'm almost certain of it, Scott.
Do you know what? He's. I noticed in the running order you got about Brighton and Mbeumo. Is he the player of the season, or certainly one of them? Yes, he's one of them. Senna Lomans is absolutely as well. And to come in when it was such a problem position. You're right there, Crookie, by the way. With that,
No,
earphones. Can't deal with earphones.
He's got a problem with his ears.
Luckily, Le Mans deals with crosses better than I deal with headphones.
But to come into the biggest club in the country with everything that's going on, how heavy that shirt weighs, in the most difficult position there is, because if you make a mistake, you don't touch the ball, your mind can start playing games with you. I think he's been, and for the money, he is right up there for signing of the season.
Yeah, certainly is. Crookmeister, thank you very much for joining us today. Wolves against Aston Villa is in the Premier League Friday night. We've got that one live. Bournemouth Sunderland Saturday. Game Day Live takes you round the grounds with Adrian from 2:30. And then Scott Crook, Mickey Gray and Perry Groves will be alongside me for Game Day Live on Sunday. What a team. What a stellar team that is. One
team of the 90s.
Make sure you are with us. Yeah. Team of the 90s. Not a brilliant team though, Scott, because you only used to come off the bench.
That's not true. Let's look back at the history books.
We're joking. It's because you said you can't be a brilliant player if you don't get into starting 11, and I wanted to throw that back at you somehow. Scotty, thank you very much. Love to have you. We're back on Monday, so back at all of the weekend's Premier League action. By which time, you never know, the title race might even be tighter.